thank you again to the Robert and Penelope Steiner Foundation for flood their thank you at the beginning. So thank you to them. So I'm going to just ask one question, and then we'll open it up to you all. There's probably enough of you here that there might be a question among them. So since we're in Chicago, I feel like I need to get this out of the way. Chicago being kind of an American center for brutalist architecture. Hungarian architects, Bauhaus, from the Bauhaus, Moholy-Nagy was here. There was a significant Bauhaus presence in Chicago. So, and of course the architecture here. So I feel like I guess I want to ask, what was it about that architecture that you thought was both maybe thematically and cinematically interesting to dive into?
I was just fascinated by how much of such vitriol so many people hated. Donald Trump has a program, or he had one back when he was the president of the United States, which was called Make Federal Buildings Beautiful Again.
Yes.
And I thought that was really interesting. The thing is that, these monuments all over the world, Chicago, Lithuania, New York, Israel, you name it, they're so radical, they're so extreme, and I identify with that way of working. I too like extremes. I like minimalism, I like maximalism, and for me brutalism is both. So, working backwards from there, the characters were sort of written to their circumstance because brutalism came out of the Bauhaus in the 20s and 30s before the Nazis shut it down in the early 30s. And I was sort of fascinated by the way that people or communities tend to perceive anything which is unfamiliar to them, whether it's a new building that's been erected in a different style than everything else, a colonial style in the community, or if there's a new member of their community that has, different traditions, different heritage, different, skin color, and how the reaction is usually the same. Community's first instinct initially is to have those buildings torn down and those people thrown out. And so for me, I felt that it was a style of architecture where the visual allegory was quite profound, very direct. And so that's where it came from.
Great. So are there questions? I see a hand, the white shirt, it's a little bit, the light's hard to see. There you go.
Hi. So throughout the film, Laszlo's status as a Jew is very centered, but his faith and his relationship to Judaism often feels very marginalized. So I think it's something that a lot of American Jews can relate to. And then there's the reveal at the end of how deeply this building was informed by his relationship with the concentration camps. So I'm wondering how you found ways to use the film with Judaism in ways that the audience might or might not have noticed.
I think that, most artists are more devoted to their projects than they are, I don't know very many devoutly religious artists. It's almost like they don't have space for it. It requires a level of obsession which doesn't create a lot of space for anything else in one's life. And there's a monologue, from his wife in the movie where she says, I feel like we're losing him to this project. As I said, the characters were written to their circumstance. I mean, this happens to be about post-war psychology and post-war architecture, but the film could take place at any time and be about someone from anywhere. Because the characters are Eastern European Jews, it was important for us to get the details right, including that, perhaps his wife is a little more devoted than he is. I think that, in the sequence with his niece, who has met a young man who is, seemingly quite conservative and is planning to make the move to Israel. You see that Adrian's character is a little bit more flippant about all of it, but ultimately he decides to leave America to follow his wife, which has a lot more to do with her than anything else. And the end of the movie, the idea was that it reveals itself to be a love story. Because the film is, of course, very cynical, because I am very cynical. The film is arduous because to make something is an arduous process and a painful one. But ultimately it's interesting because you see this character who seems to be perhaps something of a philanderer, which Louis Kahn had 3 families, very well publicized. Very much a man of the era. He is ultimately hopelessly devoted to his wife, and he's flawed and he's imperfect, but he does love her, perhaps even more than you realize, and that's what the epilogue is really about.
Yes, that's the hand I saw. Yep, you're on with that. Yep, that's you. Yep.
Out of this entire movie, I think the most beautiful and the most memorable moment for me is the very last line that Jovia speaks, where she says, "It's not about the journey, it really is about the destination." I think it's absolutely a wonderful closer line that really summates a lot of my thoughts in the movie that I can't quite articulate words right now. But my question is, when during the writing process did that line come in, and how do you think it reflects his journey? How do you think it reflects Laszlo's journey?
Everyone hear that in the back?
The question was just about the last line of the film. It's not the journey, it is the destination. That's just how I feel. If it was about the journey is hell. Speak to, anyone in the room that's given birth. It is only about the destination. As much as bad rest in your second and third trimester, that rocks. But it really is like that. The thing is that it's, making something, whether it's a film or building a building, it's a labor. And I think that I personally find it a little obnoxious that people are always stop and smell the roses. Because maybe there aren't any, sometimes it is, a means to an end. And sometimes you suffer a lot for something. And I don't know, I personally find it frustrating when people have tried to tell me otherwise. But wasn't pregnancy so beautiful? It wasn't. Having a child is beautiful. Raising that child is beautiful. The pregnancy was a challenge. That's all.
Do you feel like Laszlo? I feel there's a lot of metaphors going on, but it just occurs to me that Laszlo's journey with this particular benefactor, you might feel connected to in terms of your journeys in making movies and with Hollywood.
Yeah, of course, the movie's about the relationship between artist and the patron, art and commerce. These are two things that don't go, they don't play very nice, but they need each other. And that's a very strange process that I don't think enough people talk about. I think people don't really talk about it because they're worried that no one will ever write them another check for the next project. But no, I mean, the reality is that there are extraordinary patrons, extraordinary benefactors, people who really do have their heart in the right place. There's not a lot of those. Yeah, so there's also that. But you know, I think that you know, if anyone is being totally transparent about the relationship they have with someone that they feel beholden to, you know, you're never on equal footing. You know, I mean, if you want it for the good of your project, you sometimes have to dabble in moral and ethical situations which are not your own. I mean, I've been in that position a lot. I know many of you have probably been in that situation, like to keep a job. You know, you have to laugh at your bigoted, you know, boss's jokes. I mean, it's a complicated dynamic.
I saw